Welcome back to my channel. The astute among you will notice that I'm standing this time. That's because I'm going full teacher as I look at the connections between the Cosmere and Gnosticism. Literally no one asked for this, but I'm doing it anyway. I have a 20-page script, and I will be referencing it multiple times. This is not my regular shtick. So, let's get into it with the intro. So I want to start with what this video is and what this video is not. Sanderson himself said, which of the philosophies in the books do you look at and say, yeah, or even better, listen to lots of different ones, and maybe those different viewpoints are all going to have interesting points that'll give you things to think upon. And this is the one that I've been thinking upon. So Sanderson, Brando Sando, if you're listening to this one's for you. I'm going to be connecting various elements from the Cosmere, from Gnosticism together to explain possible sources of inspiration for Sanderson's writing. And of course, this video is meant to be fun. Fun. Don't take it too seriously. This video is not a definitive breakdown of the Cosmere. It can't be. I haven't read all of it. So as of right now, I've not read the 4th Stormlight Archives book. I've not read Elantris. I've not read Warbreaker. I have not read the last Mistborn Era 2 book. So there are some gaps in my knowledge, I will admit. I'm going to ignore them, and I'm going to power ahead anyway, as is the way of academia. I'm going to dive into some speculation, obviously, but I feel like Sanderson is a very talented writer. He is obviously pulling from a number of inspirations and sources, so this does not serve as like the end-all be-all for Sanderson's work. It is just the lens that we are going to view that work through today. This is also not a definitive breakdown of Gnosticism. I am not a religious scholar. I have spent a couple of hours watching internet videos. That does not count. That does not constitute research. Also, Gnosticism turns out really, really complex. I will link to a playlist down below of like 60-something videos. I've not watched all of them, but yeah, you'll get a sense that this is a very loosely connected canon with lots of different stories that intertwine and contradict each other. We will do our best. I will do my best to bring in the things that I want to talk about. Also, as a religious belief that died out in the 5th century, there is surprisingly little documentation we have for Gnosticism, so we don't really know its reach. We have to do a lot of extrapolating on that. Gnosticism itself is a loose concept. It's a splintered group. No one, there's even debate over the term Gnosticism, like people would not have identified themselves as Gnostics. They would have just called themselves Christians. But there is now Venetian Gnosticism, Julian Gnosticism, Hatharism, I think. They're all like loosely based around each other, but all a little bit different. I will not be making a distinction between these different groups. I will just be talking about it in a very broad strokes. I do not think Sanderson sat down and said, yes, I'm going to make the Cosmere about Venetian Gnosticism, specifically and exclusively. That did not happen. I'm just going to talk about the larger elements and how they work into things that are in the Cosmere. I'm unpacking a very complicated system of beliefs and its history. I'm going to screw up. This is also not a dismissal or a rejection of other points of inspiration for Sanderson. Sanderson, again, very strong writer, very strong world builder. He's pulling from a number of things. And while I will pull in things like idealism as tied into early Gnostic beliefs and kind of talk about how some of the things that Sanderson has said are inspirations for his work, I am not going to deny that there are other religious systems at work here. There are other points of inspiration. I'll just be ignoring them for this video. I want to give shout outs and credit where credit is due. First of all, to the Esoterica YouTube channel and Dr. Justin Sledge, who is the source of information for like 90% of the stuff I'm going to say about Gnosticism. I'll link the channel, his Gnosticism playlist, and a few of the key videos down below, the ones that I took the most inspiration, the most information from. I also want to shout out the Coppermind and the 17th Shard, which are conglomerations, wikis of fan aggregated content of the Cosmere. Really helpful to find primary sources when, you know, Sanderson said some random nonsense at a signing one time. It's on the 17th Shard. It gets on Coppermind, and they have the annotations for it and everything. Really great for research. So shout out to those two sites. Link down below. We'll be looking at a lot of evidence from the Coppermind in the second half of the video, most of which has been raphoed. So for the uninitiated, when Sanderson does not want to answer a question, he just says that's a rapho, which is read and find out. And I think you get a card. By the way, if Brando Sando reads this, consider this my official application for a Rapho card, if that's still a thing going on. All right, and with that out of the way, let's get into the basics of Gnosticism. We're going to start with the Gnostic deific hierarchy. So, according to Gnosticism, there is, above everything, a one true unknowable God, also called the monad. So the monad exists outside of our universe. It can't possibly be a being that has a tangible form. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to... They would be finite. They would be able to be defined, and that's not possible because they're an unknowable God. Below the monad, or like next to the monad, it's very complicated. There is what's called the pleroma. The pleroma is the fullness, basically aspects of the monad, the one true God, that are in some ways like autonomous and are aspects of him, not separate from him, but also separate from him, or else the rest of the story doesn't really make sense. Who would have guessed that religious beliefs would be contradictory and difficult to parse? The most important member of the pleroma for the purposes of this video is Sophia. She is the aeon of wisdom and reason. That's what the pleroma, different aspects of the pleroma are called, or aeons. Sophia either tries to breach the barrier to the unknowable God, or she, I need to consult my notes here, tries to emanate without syzygy, which basically means she tries to reproduce without a partner. In so doing, she accidentally, oopsie, creates an evil god, which is the demiurge. The demiurge is unaware of its origins and truly believes itself to be the one true God of reality, the material world, which is also created in its wake. Sophia is cast out of the pleroma into essentially the darkness of the real, of reality, and is more or less stuck in the realm with the demiurge. The demiurge actually has its origins in the Platonic dialogues, which is where we'll connect idealism later. These are the teachings of Plato, more specifically Plato's Timaeus, which was written in 360 BC. The pre-Christian Platonic idea of the demiurge was just as the craftsman of the world, a being who tries to create perfect beings with imperfect matter. There are these ideal forms, and the demiurge tries to impress them onto hule, which is matter. And because of the shortcomings of matter, it's finite, it ages, it changes. The ideal forms get changed and shifted, and nothing's ever really perfect. Also important to point out that the original version of the demiurge was not evil. It's just having to press ideal forms onto an imperfect universe. To Plato, the world is still fundamentally fair and God is still fundamentally good, which is a key idea in beliefs at in his time. That is going to be sharply contrasted with the Gnostic worldview because the demiurge is objectively evil. The reasons for this shift between the Platonic demiurge and the Gnostic demiurge are too complicated to get into. There's a lot of history behind it with the Egyptians and the Jews and the Exodus from Egypt coming back. It's a whole thing. So we'll not talk about that. It's just important to know that in Gnosticism, Demiurge, super evil, and believes himself to be God because of his ignorance of these stations above him. I will do a quick aside and talk about Sanderson directly addressing the inclusion of idealism within his world building. A fan asked the question, I've been thinking about idealism as a philosophy and how the concept of the cognitive realm is sort of like a very realistic version of idealism. Is there any influence there at all? And Brandon Sanderson says, oh, definitely. I was a closet philosophy major in college. I didn't actually do that, but I attended a lot of philosophy classes, and I'll tell you this, philosophers don't know to write. That's the most annoying part. You read their essays, and they're full of brilliant ideas with these enormous run-on sentences that make no sense. You have to so I got really frustrated by that. But I really love the classes and reading and thinking like that, and the touch of it is all over my books. If you look for it, you'll find a lot of different philosophies. You'll find all those guys in different places on different philosophers and different religions and stuff like that. We are connecting the idea of the cognitive realm to this idea of idealism that is, again, this Platonic idea of idealized forms that the demiurge is using and impressing on imperfect matter, and it gets screwed up because reality sucks. Back to Gnosticism. Reality, according to the Gnostic belief, is a prison ruled by the demiurge, evil god, and his archons. Down here, our next step down is the archons. The archons are the rulers of the physical realm. They are either evil, inept, or both. In most cases, both. They are also the lowest form of the Almighty. They're the lowest form of this trickling down of God's essence. We're going to get into some story time. All right. The demiurge, again, evil god. This is the God of the Old Testament, according to the Gnostic belief system. Okay? So, the demiurge declares that he is the one true God and there are no gods before me. In that moment, the monad basically comes down and is like, I'm the one true God. Don't be saying stuff like that. And he projects a shadow of himself into the world of reality. Okay, this is where we get man was created in God's image. With his archons, the demiurge uses that template of God to try to make man. They create Adam, the first human, with psyche and matter, but he just kind of lays there. Sophia, remember Sophia? She's the Aeon that caused all this to happen. She whispers to the demiurge that he should breathe life into humanity. He should breathe life into the Adam. And as the demiurge is breathing into the Adam, Sophia blows her essence into it. And we get a piece of the true divine into our souls. This also grants humanity the ability to reconnect back to the pleroma. Very important for later. It's also worth noting that because all of the archons and the demiurge all gave up a part of themselves to create Adam, to create humanity, man is stronger than any one of them on their own because they're dumb. Should not have done that. We have a divine spark through Sophia and therefore connection back to this higher order of this deific hierarchy. I also want to talk about the three divisions of reality according to the Gnostics. So I've already mentioned when Adam was created, he was created with psyche and matter. So we have three levels of reality. There is the spiritual, which is the realm of the monad. It's separate from everything that we are involved in. The ultimate goal of humanity is to reconnect with the pleroma, which means reconnecting with the spiritual realm through gnosis or knowledge. Knowledge of the truth of reality. Apart from the spiritual realm, we also have the psychical realm. Psychical realm. This is the realm of the mind and the bridge between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. something between divine perfection and corrupt matter. In some stories, this is where Sophia is hanging out. This is where she escaped from to hide from the demiurge. Finally, at the bottom, we've got the material realm. That's where we live. It sucks. Gnostic teaching suggests that the material realm, with its changeable nature and its decay, is actually a prison that we are all trying to escape. Reality to the Gnostics is a cosmic tragedy. Now that we have kind of a roller coaster ride of the basics of Gnosticism, let's talk about some Gnostic beliefs. Ascension for the Gnostics was attained through gnosis, or knowledge, rather than spirituality. Gnostics believed that this knowledge, this ability to ascend, was innate in every single person. In fact, some Gnostic beliefs argue that eventually all of humanity is getting back to the pleroma, except those who learn about the truth and then reject it. They can stay here. Through baptism, which is much more rigidly defined and is a 3 or 5 step process, one is joined with their angel in the spiritual realm, because we all have an angel, like just for us to link up with, and then we ascend through our knowledge. On the larger scale, Sophia reunites with Christ, who is sent by the one true unknowable God as a syzygy for Sophia, and they ascend back into the pleroma, thus leaving the door open for the rest of us to follow them. It's not going to be super relevant for what we're going to talk about, but it's cool. According to Gnostics, all of Jesus's mainstream teachings are all just this story couched in metaphor, and you have to read between the lines in order to find the truth and ascend back to the pleroma. We're going to get into the Cosmere now, and hopefully we'll start seeing some parallels between these things. Talk about the Cosmere deific hierarchy and try to show how it's similar to Gnosticism. So at the top, we have the God Beyond, which Sanderson does not want to talk about at all. The God Beyond is our Cosmere parallel to the monad. There is a reference to the God Beyond in Mistborn Era 2. It's one of the few instances where Sanderson has directly answered a question about this. And those answers included direct references to Gnosticism, as did his annotations of the scene. But he also says that he is worried about talking about the God Beyond and about this because he doesn't want to give set answers. He feels like it cheapens the character's exploration of the world and their search for answers. In the annotations for Alloy of Law, Chapter 10, Sanderson wrote, quote, "The other little world-building item of note here is the idea of what Wayne calls the God Beyond, which is an idea that had begun to creep into society. The idea that there is a greater God of the universe beyond people like Harmony or Kelsier. It's somewhat analogous to some of the Gnostic beliefs of early Christianity." So there we have an admission, basically, of this connection. Sanderson is aware that this is something that he's pulling from for the inspiration for the God Beyond. One person asked the question, in Stormlight, Dalinar mentions the God Beyond, and throughout the Cosmere, gods... Is there an omniscient, omnipotent, actual God of the Cosmere? Sanderson wrote, "Is there an omniscient, omnipotent God in the Cosmere? Some people believe that there is. You guys laugh about this, but I don't mean it to be a laughing thing. There are certain questions I will not answer in the Cosmere, specifically because it will too much underline some of the characters' beliefs." I believe that's supposed to be undermine some of the characters' beliefs. And I want to treat characters respectfully. So whether there is life after you pass into the beyond, and whether there is a God of gods, an omnipotent, as well as we would define as monotheistic God, are questions that I don't answer and I let the characters deal with, because if I answer that, then the characters' discussions about those are meaningless. Not really, but they kind of are. So there are a couple of things I won't answer about the Cosmere because the characters don't have these answers. And then the questioner asked, do you know the answer? And Sanderson says, yes, I know the answer. So he knows whether or not this is the connection here, but he refuses to say, I understand that. I respect his reasons for it, but we're gonna soldier on. Sanderson is so reluctant to talk about the God beyond that there really isn't anything written about the true origins of this universe as we are viewing it. So we're going to skip a step here and go down to what's essentially the equivalent of the demiurge, and that would be Adonalsium. Adonalsium fulfills the role of something between the one true God, the God beyond, and the shards, which I'm going to argue are equivalent to the archons. While not much is known about Adonalsium right now, we do know that he is at least capable of evil and subterfuge, because the shards that were created through his betrayal and the splitting of his essence are things like ruin and odium, which is basically like evil. So Adonalsium is at the very least capable of evil thoughts and evil actions. It is not a purely good god. He is not a flawless being. All the shards are shown to be flawed. If we get down to the shards, even when we unify some of the shards, on Scandriel, ruin and preservation united to become a harmony, but harmony is still inept and terrible at their job. He admits that the humans have not adapted in the way that he would have liked them to. Chris admits of Adonalsium, quote, "I don't know if it was a force or a being, though I suspect the latter." So Adonalsium is so nebulous and unknown that we're not even sure if it was a thing or just like a force, but Chris seems to believe that it was a being. So we have the argument that Adonalsium is the unification of these shards, is a being, is a creature in our material realm. So this leads further weight to the idea of a singular, flawed being rather than an unchanging divine force, which would be more of the role of the monad or the God beyond. While we know that Adonalsium was betrayed and his essence shattered into these shards, we are given no moral stance on this decision. It might have been the best option to go ahead and kill Adonalsium, and that could imply, again, either ineptitude or evil on the part of Adonalsium. Could very well be a tyrant akin to the demiurge, for all we know. There's this exchange from JordanCon 2018. Billy Todd said, so there's the creator, which is the urge, which is the creator of the universe. He has large hand gesture. Okay, the creator of the universe. And then the demiurge is the one that creates its universe. Small hand gesture within the larger hand gesture. And entities living within the universe need knowledge of that which is beyond what the demiurge has created. And Sanderson says, okay, that matches pretty well. We need knowledge of what is beyond what the demiurge has created. That knowledge is the key to ascension, because that is going to line up with the Gnostic beliefs as well. The monad and then the demiurge. And Sanderson says, yeah, that sounds about right. From the Calamity Chicago signing, February 22nd, 2016, Eric says, in Secret History, we learned the 16 shards that shattered Adonalsium. Was that done on behalf of an Adonalsium force? And Brandon Sanderson says, you're focusing too much on this idea of an anti-Adonalsium. The original question, I believe, asked me was, is there a force that is opposed to Adonalsium? And it left me with a lot of wiggle room. In other words, the people who killed Adonalsium, you could say, were a force, and any person who opposed Adonalsium, what they were trying to get was a devil. What they were trying to get was a devil, but to do that, you must assume Adonalsium was a more Christian-style god, and I haven't confirmed any of that. Once again, I'm adding emphasis here. This idea that Adonalsium is a Christian-style god is part of what Sanderson is pushing back here. Christian-style God, what does that mean? True good, best intentions, perfect, flawless. Adonalsium is not those things. Also, this idea that he's pushing back against is that Adonalsium needs a devil figure to play against him, whereas if we make him analogous to the demiurge, there's no need for an evil force because Adonalsium is capable of that evil himself. So then we go down from Adonalsium to the shards. I'm going to say these are our equivalent to the archons. They are the minions of Adonalsium. In this case, they are not really like under his command. They're closer to the relationship between the monad and the pleroma in that the shards are all aspects of Adonalsium. But there is some suggestion in the books that the different worlds, the reason why their magic is so different, stems from which of the cosmic beings, the ones who have the shards, is ruling over them, and the ways which those shards infuse those planets with their power. From Mistborn's Secret History, you told me this was your power, Kelsier said, gesturing again at the well, trying to get the god back on topic, that it gathers here. Yes, and elsewhere, Preservation said, but yes, here, like dew collects, my power gathers in that spot. It is natural, a cycle, clouds, rain, river, humidity. You cannot press so much essence into a system without it congealing here and there. So here he's saying you can't push your power, you can't push your influence into a planet without it manifesting in some way. And I think the implication here is that the different shards that are ruling over the different planets and the way the archons were ruling over the heavenly bodies are the ways that the different magics are infused into those planets. The shards are also incapable of returning to the beyond in much the same way that the archons and anything down here is completely cut off from the upper levels of the deific hierarchy on this side. From Mistborn's Secret History, Sazed says, I cannot bring them back, Sazed said softly. Not yet, perhaps not ever. The beyond is a place I cannot reach. So that implies that the shards are incapable of piercing the veil to the world of being. They are in the world of becoming. So they cannot get back to the God beyond. They can't get back to the beyond, a place outside of our universe. Starting to sound pretty close to what is going on over here. From the Calamity Chicago signing, we have Triforce Order saying, Harmony says in Secret History that the beyond is a place he cannot reach. Is that true for all shards that we have met so far, or... And Brandon Sanderson says, that's a Raffo. Yeah, this kind of stuff is... trying to emphasize here that these kind of questions are the things that Sanderson is very often reluctant to talk about. Also worth noting that the descriptions for preservation throughout Secret History change from God with a capital G to God with a lowercase g, suggesting a re-examination of their power and influence the more that is learned about them. Again, the power here comes from knowledge. The more you realize that the shards are not God, capital G God, they are gods, the less power they have, the less mystical they end up seeming. Now let's talk about humanity. Human beings appear as distinct entities within any iteration of the cognitive realm or the Shadesmar. On Roshar, humanity is burning balls of light, whereas everything else is a sphere. On Scandriel, humans and metal, which we know is infused with the magic of that world, which I'm going to argue comes from the true spiritual realm, glow. Right? So once again, humanity is special within the cognitive realm of that world. We are different from an item or even from other animals. Both of these things suggest the presence of a soul, and that soul marks us as unique among all of creation in the Cosmere. I say us. Marks humanity in this fictional world as unique in the Cosmere. Presence of a soul is the delineation between humanity and literally everything else. Very important when we're talking about making the connections here. Going back to the shards real quick, even though they proclaim themselves to be God, they are frequently shown to be inept, violent, weak, dangerous, and frequently need the aid of humans to get them to achieve their goals. We have also seen, at least on Roshar, the resistance of a single person against one of these supposed gods, and they overpowered them by themselves. 3 divisions of reality in the Cosmere. You are not going to believe this. All right, what do we have in the Cosmere? We have the spiritual realm. We have the cognitive realm. And we have the physical realm. I'm not a religious scholar, but that looks pretty exactly the same to me. The 3 major divisions of the Cosmere are basically a one-to-one parallel with the divisions of Gnosticism. Their functions also largely seem to overlap. Just as with Gnosticism, the key to humanity's enlightenment within the Cosmere seems to lie somewhere within the cognitive realm, though I doubt there's going to be a Sophia analog in the Cosmere. There is something with connecting with the beings from the cognitive realm that allow us to ascend to higher orders of power. Also, importantly, the pursuit of knowledge and truth is how you gain power on Roshar explicitly. The connection to a higher order of being, especially on Roshar with the Spren, is going to fuel humanity's potential for reconnecting back to the spiritual realm, and this will be the ultimate goal of humanity within the greater Cosmere universe. Pattern from Rhythm of War, chapter 75 says, "You and the others refer to Shadesmar as the world of the Spren and the physical realm as your world, or the real world. That is not true. We are not 2 worlds, but one, and we are not 2 peoples, but one. Humans, Spren, 2 halves, neither complete. If you replace Spren with angels, this sounds like Gnostic dogma. We are not 2 different people. We are not 2 different planes. Humans, angels, we're the same. We're going to come together and unite this bridge." Completing that connection is the goal of this entire system, entire universe. This is like tinfoil hat theory. I know, like, I'm not already there, but there are a total of 5 oaths as a maximum. We know this from the, which one is it? The law people, the sky something, whatever they're called, right? We know that the 5th oath is, for them, it says, "I am the law." I think that the 5th oaths are going to tie the person into a concept, into a thought, right? So like the law, or like I am justice, I am equality, something like that, which would bring them closer to the concepts that the Spren represent. Now, the tinfoil hat bit of this is that there are 5 baptisms, 3 or 5 baptisms within Gnosticism, but I think that that's just coincidence and not like an intentional thing that Sanderson is trying to do. I do believe that other stuff that I was saying. I do believe that the highest order, the highest oath is going to be ascending basically to a concept, adhering to a cognitive ideal, and connecting to that realm in a much more direct way. It's also worth mentioning that investiture, the underlying magic for all of Cosmere, is described as the movement of the spiritual power of creation, which I do not believe Adonalsium had. I don't think that he is the creator of the universe. From the Coppermind wiki, paraphrasing from the Lost Metal, chapter 17, they say, investiture can be considered a kind of spiritual energy. While everything in the Cosmere has an invested component in the spiritual realm, known as a spirit web, that investiture is usually inaccessible. Magic systems provide the most common access to investiture, which allows people to commit incredible feats using the power. Nowhere that I could find suggests that investiture originates with Adonalsium or with the shards. From a r/books AMA from 2015, June 5th specifically, Chaos said, "You have once said, with regard to a question about shards being the most powerful thing in the Cosmere, that some would say that other subtle forces are being manifest. Are these subtle forces related to Adonalsium's opposition?" And Brandon Sanderson said, "There is belief in a god who is not one of the shards." And that's all he says. So, again, that seems to suggest to me we're talking about a higher order of God. Great. What have I proven here today? Probably nothing. But let's talk about some potential... Where could we go from here? Like, what could potentially come from this link between Gnosticism and the Cosmere? So let's talk about the past and the future. So we know the Dawn Shards are the 4 primal commands that Adonalsium supposedly used to create the Cosmere. Again, I will argue that I don't believe these powers come from Adonalsium. Rather, these are the best in-world indications that something like the monad exists. We know of one of the Dawn Shards directly, and it's implied that we've seen another. Risen's Dawn Shard is the Dawn Shard of Change, a primal command to grow and adapt. Notably, the key distinction in the material realm in Gnosticism is that it is one where change is possible. Spiritual and psychical realms are considered unchanging and ideal. So the concept that we can change is something that can only exist in the physical or material world. I am going to go out on a limb here, and this is my big one. This is my big one. Okay, Dalinar's Unite Them has been theorized to be a Dawn Shard command, and I am on board with this, and I'll explain why. Okay, first off, let me get some quotes in here to show where this idea comes from. All right, so there was a GK Pseudo asked, "Do we know anyone who is currently a Dawn Shard other than Risen?" Brandon Sanderson said, "Yes, you have met people who are at least one who is currently a Dawn Shard other than Risen." So we know there's a Dawn Shard out there. That was not confirmed yet as of that interview. This next one comes from Emerald City Comic Con 2018, March 1st of 2018. It says, "Was Honor just talking about people on Rashar when he told Dalinar to unite them?" Brandon Sanderson said, "Raffo, read and find out." Did not want to talk about it. So, unite them seems to be an ambiguous statement. From Prague Sighting in October 26, 2019 said, "Who's telling unite them to Dalinar, because it's obviously not Stormfather nor Honor, because he's hearing it even outside the visions, right?" And Brandon Sanderson says, "He is hearing that. That is a Raffo. You can have a Raffo card." Question stems on this fact that Dalinar can hear unite them from anywhere, right? Outside of any other character's influence. Where's the highest order of being that we could talk about? Adonalsium doesn't even exist anymore because he's been broken into the shards. So I'm arguing that this comes from a earlier place, right? From a primal place, from one of the Dawn Shards. A general signing books in 2018, January 1st of 2018. We have Larasia Mistborn. They said, "Dalinar has a task to unite them. Is its ultimate purpose apply only to Roshar, or could it go beyond Roshar to the greater Cosmere?" And Brandon Sanderson says, this could be interpreted that way. To the greater Cosmere. Okay, if Dalinar's command to unite them is a Dawn Shard, and Dawn Shards originate with the God Beyond and not ad Elysium. It could be a command to unite the three realms. So I'm saying beyond uniting the people of Roshar, beyond uniting the people of the Cosmere, this is a command to unite the three levels of creation, the three levels of reality. There's further evidence when he actually briefly unites all three realms in Oathbringer. This could also hint at the potential for a pre-Adonalsium god attempting to communicate and drive humanity back to a higher, fuller state of being. And that was the purpose for this entire thing, was to give you my crazy theory on Dalinar and the true purpose of the Cosmere. I believe that if these connections hold, and if these assumptions are met out, right, that this is a completely reasonable theory for where the Cosmere is ultimately heading. Now, again, is Brandon Sanderson drawing from other sources? Of course. Is he, an expert storyteller with lots of different sources of inspiration that he is mixing together? Could this go a completely different way? Yes. But I'm particularly interested in the fact that the points that I'm finding in connection and the points that I am circling around with this connection here are the ones that Brandon Sanderson seems the most reluctant to talk about. And I know that the absence of evidence really shouldn't do anything, right? Like, that doesn't mean that I'm on the right track or anything, just that he has not talked about it. But I find it curious that so many of the things that I was looking into and like making these connections are the very points that he's very reluctant to talk about. So that's my theory of the Cosmere. I think we are going toward a unification of the realms as the ultimate goal for the Cosmere, particularly with the stories around Roshar, which are the bulk of the Cosmere mythos by length. So it's going to be a 10-book series. Each one's like 1,400 pages long at this point. And so there's just a lot of material there. It's where I think a lot of the crunchier, more epic bits of the universe are being explored. I hope that I've given you an interesting thing to think upon. Do I think that Sanderson set out to create his universe as an analog to Gnostic belief? No. Do I think it's kind of interesting that they line up fairly well? Of course. And do I think Dalinar's command is going to hold some great significance in the future of the books? Of course it will. It's being teased at, it's being played with. This is my theory. This is my contribution to the Cosmere discourse. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. I hope that you take some time, on occasion, to deep dive into what you're reading, to think critically about the worlds and the words that you dive into, and their connections to previous works. All authors are building off of the shoulders of giants, the shoulders of masters, and it is good to, on occasion, think about those connections. I do my booktube thing. Please like, comment, subscribe. The number one thing you can do to help grow this channel is to hit the thumbs up button. Apparently the new hotness in the algorithm is how many of my subscribers actually thumbs up the videos that I make. So please do that. And until the next one, when there is a next one like this, take care.